It's the rest and regulation nerve. It's in charge of behavioral regulation, emotional regulation, social speech and communication. It actually even regulates like inflammation and gut motility. So the vagus nerve has more jobs than any other freaking nerve in the body. And it's sensory modulation of all these core components that go haywire in ADHD is its job. So when we can learn about it, that's the first step to be able to tap into it.
Welcome to the Soaring Child Podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Welcome back to the Soaring Child Podcast. Now, imagine this for a moment. You're watching your child in the middle of like a really chaotic moment. Maybe they're overwhelmed, acting impulsive, or even having like a meltdown that just sort of feels impossible to control. You've tried all the usual approaches, to calm them down, but nothing seems to work. What if the solution wasn't in what they were doing, but in how their body and their brain were communicating behind the scenes? Hold that thought for a moment. Today, we're diving into a fascinating yet overlooked piece of the ADHD puzzle. It's called the vagus nerve. It's known as the unsung hero, and it plays a crucial role in regulating our emotions, our focus, and even our physical health. To help us uncover all these secrets, I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Tony Ebel. Dr. Tony is a certified pediatric wellness chiropractor with 15 years of experience helping kiddos with ADHD, autism, sensory processing disorder, and so much more. And through his groundbreaking Perfect Storm Clinic and his work training chiropractors worldwide, we were just chatting about some chiropractors in Australia that he has trained. Dr. Tony empowers families to take a natural nervous system centered approach to healing. Today, he's here to share how understanding and supporting the vagus nerve can be a game changer for kids with ADHD. Dr. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This ADHD conversation is in me all day, every day, not just because of patients, but my own journey. It was what we're going to talk about that I had no clue about, right? That turned my life around. And at 21, you're, not a kid anymore, right? College kid. And so such a blessing to be here. You're just that scenario you depicted on the intro is just so real life, and excited to open the hood and help parents figure out exactly what the heck that is.
Yeah, no, look, I think that a lot of parents that are listening today have been in that exact moment, haven't they? And so I'm glad that you're here, and thank you for sharing that. You too have an ADHD journey, and it adds this extra, like you totally
Yes.
understand what families might be going through.
100%. I'm unique in this way. Well, actually, I'm sure plenty of families now are here thanks to your guidance and your support to this perspective and seeing their kids soar instead of struggle. True, point blank. Because in my prayers every single morning, I really do thank God. I'm a big gratitude guy, and so I thank God for giving me ADHD because it's made this massive transformation through nervous system care and other nutrition and everything else to be an absolute superpower. Like I get more done by 10 a.m. than most people do in a full 10-day period. And so, but yeah, for 20 years, Dan, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I couldn't stay asleep. I couldn't sit still in class. I couldn't do the easy work, right? I couldn't do the keep track of things, keep them organized, keep them turned in. I could do the sit down and crush a standardized test because I have that, kind of raging bull Ferrari brain. But everything else in between was not quite my cup of tea until my nervous system got regulated. So yeah, out of all the stuff we take care of in the clinic, obviously my personal journey, a teenager comes in, a young adult comes in, anybody comes in with ADHD, I kind of tune in a little extra just because I've seen it transform my own life.
Amazing, amazing. Well, why don't we dive in, or, to all things vagus nerve? For
Yeah.
those of who may not be familiar with it, why don't you just start off by explaining what is the vagus nerve, why it's so crucial for our kiddos' overall health and development?
You got it. Well, I think it's always fun to kind of, we were just talking about travel. Different cities have different cultures and context to them. And when people hear, when they hear the word Vegas, the common spelling is VEGAS, Las Vegas, which is anything but a calm nervous system, right? That is the city
Anything
of
but,
chaos. So
yeah.
maybe it's just a fun little pun that all lines up because Vegas in this context, it's a Latin word, VAGUS, which is, it got that nickname because it's the wandering nerve, which there was an anatomist. That's how they first found it. Like, whoa, this nerve leaves the brainstem and it goes all the way down through the cervical spine, the neck, through the thorax, into the abdomen. It is the longest sensory nerve in the body. So if you know anything about ADHD, you know that sensory challenges are involved, brainstem challenges. And so the vagus nerve is 85% of it is sensory. It's actually a cranial nerve. And I know I'm going nerdy already, but that's important because it literally branches from the bottom and the back of the brain. And the bottom of the back and the brain actually tell the middle and the front of the brain what to do. So we often blame ADHD on prefrontal cortex issues, but the front of the brain, I always joke, Dana, it's kind of like the dad. It is just doing what it's told to do by the back of the brain. And as long as it's not all screwed up and it can get that information. So the vagus nerve goes down into the body. The other important thing about the vagus nerve, perhaps its most important thing, is it is a parasympathetic sensory nerve. So it is in charge of rest, relaxation, and digestion. Its old school nickname was the rest and digest nerve. I think it very much deserves an updated nickname because we now know so much more about the neuroscience of it. It's the rest and regulation nerve. It's in charge of behavioral regulation, emotional regulation, social speech and communication. It actually even regulates like inflammation and gut motility. So the vagus nerve has more jobs than any other freaking nerve in the body. And it's sensory modulation of all these core components that go haywire in ADHD is its job. So when we can learn about it, that's the first step to be able to tap into it and harness it and be able to just clear this stress, calm this stress, regulate this stress that is literally trapped inside our kids' bodies and brains.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it definitely does sound like a very, very important nerve. And so can you just sort of talk to us a little bit about how does that vagus nerve dysfunction specifically affect our kiddos with ADHD? What kind of
Yeah.
symptoms or challenges might parents notice?
Yeah. So the first story you depicted is actually the perfect one. So what the Vagus nerve is not the nerve in the parasympathetic system. They're not supposed to be on and active at a high, we'll call it dose all the time. The vagus nerve is the ready nerve. The vagus nerve is there to regulate when the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system gets overactive because we're all actually wired to like if there was no vagus nerve, if there was no parasympathetic system, all of our heart rates would be at rest 120, 220, 240. We'd be living in this freaking stew of anxiety and hyperactivity and impulsivity. So the vagus is actually stimulated or called upon for stimulation. This is where dysfunction gets in the way when we're stressed, but when the stressor has passed. See, that's ADHD. So when a child's in a meltdown, a tantrum, a breakdown, and you can't get them out of it, they go into them way too often. They go into them. I always track them through 4 or 5 factors. And this is, I'm going to split these hairs, and I think people will really get vagus nerve dysfunction from this. With ADHD, with these challenges, you have the frequency. This many times per day or per week, my child has these challenges. You then have duration. How long does it go on? You have decibels, I call it. How bad is it? 10 out of 10. But the fourth factor is the one where you can really learn what the vagus nerve does and how tapping into it can help your child heal. The fourth factor is recovery and recollection. And when a child is really stuck in a storm and their brain and vagus nerve and everything is really dysregulated, even when you finally get them out of it and they're to the other side. And parents, you're living this real life and you're in conversation. You're trying to explain, hey, buddy, A happened, then B, and then C. And you took it right to Z, right? You took it right to 200 miles per hour and you had that. Next time there's A or next time there's B, let's decide differently. So this would be classic talk therapy, right? This would be classic counseling and doing that. And every parent has some form of that, wired into us. And we'll try rewards, right? If you're on that side, we'll try discipline on the, hey, the next time you do C, you get this. The next time you do bad stuff. The next time you get to C, you'll get good stuff. The child doesn't hear you. There's no sensory, they hear you, but there's no sensory perception because the vagus nerve is so dysfunctional. It's in charge of responding and learning and recollection and refractory. So that's where the vagus nerve dysfunction really shows up. Your child isn't supposed to get to 10 out of 10 for 10 minutes or an hour. And even if they do, which some of this is learning, right? Learning boundaries and all that. The vagus nerve is the key nerve to learning when I need to calm my heart rate, when I need to calm my emotions. And when the vagus nerve dysfunction sets up shop, you're in a vicious cycle. That's why we call it the perfect storm, because the nervous system is so sympathetic dominant. It's just not open to learning and growth and maturation. So parents are just stuck spinning their tires.
So what I'm hearing is, if your kid is suffering a lot from these meltdowns and tantrums, and then, when they come out of it, they're still not hearing it, that is a symptom of that vagus nerve dysfunction. What else?
Yeah. So the other ones are, you can really look to the body. And I love this. Your work really taps into this. You know how to address the brain-based challenge that is ADHD, not just through the brain, not just through talk, but through diet, nutrition, gut function, right? So the vagus nerve controls digestive motility. Mm-hmm. So the vast majority of our ADHD patients, their gut's a mess. But it's not just a mess from I'm going to split these hairs for a point of take home because nobody else talks about this. It's not just a mess from microbiome and, kind of a chemistry standpoint. The vagus nerve actually controls what are called the smooth muscles, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and it is in charge of motility. Peristalsis is the nerd word for it. And so when the vagus nerve is suppressed, your child will be refluxy, stomach pains, nervous stomach, and constipation for sure. And what happens to kids with constipation in a standard pediatrician office? Here's your Miralax. What happens with Miralax? Freaking, stage 5, right? So gut issues are an absolute positive symptom of vagus nerve dysfunction. And so is chronic inflammation. If you have a kiddo who is chronically sick, and you maybe even not only through symptomatology, you can be like, dang, they're always inflamed, congested, mucus, bags under their eyes. Maybe you've even done some labs and testing, and you just can't get these dang inflammatory markers to go down. There's neurogenic constipation, and there's neurogenic inflammation. And what I'm saying by that within neurogenic would be vagus nerve dysfunction, because the sympathetics, when they're running the show, they shut the gut down. The sympathetics, when they're running the show, they're actually preparing for fight or flight. So the body in its intelligence kind of gets duped here without the vagus nerve online. And it actually wants to be in a pro-inflammatory state because it thinks you're about to be wounded. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is pretty primal neurology. But that's where we have to begin to get ADHD kiddos better. And in today's world, we're kind of in this funky place where we know so much about microbiome and prefrontal cortex. I do find that a lot of times with patients, we're trying to help on third base when first base and second base need to be fixed first.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's fascinating. And look, I think a lot of listeners out there today would be going, well, I didn't know that, that constipation would be a sign of that vagus nerve dysfunction. I also heard that birth trauma and early stress impact the vagus nerve long term. Is this true? How does that show up in a child's health and behavior?
This is my wheelhouse, homie. This is right. If there's one thing I will take to the world, because it's one thing to know, okay, nervous system dysfunction, vagus nerve dysfunction is leading to all these things. But then eventually we land here. Well, where did it come from? What would cause that? So we know the perfect storm is a whole bunch of things, but the sequence is the most important thing. And these are the 3 lead bad guys. Okay. Number 1, with high amounts of fertility and prenatal stress. So we live in a very stressful world. We stress the heck out of our moms in every way. So, and then there's scales to this. A lot of times there is medical complication. There is, certain things that are going on. And what does the medical system do with that? They just scare the ever living heck out of mom. There's no other way to really say it, right? They probably already had some low level, what would a teen say? Low key anxiety,
Oh,
and
don't
yeah,
get me started
right.
with this
I don't
low
know if I got
key.
that
Oh
right.
my gosh, I've got a
Yeah.
teen as well. We hear that all the time.
Yeah, totally, right? So it goes from low key to full send, right?
Yeah.
When they get into pregnancy, because now they're doing all these tests and all that. So we actually know there's a really cool a bunch of papers, but one of my favorite papers is about the vagus nerve, autonomic nervous system development, and fetal development during these sensitive periods. Now, let me simplify that. We actually know that the vagus nerve develops on later during the fetal development in utero, and it still has a lot of development to do throughout childhood. So, what we now know about fertility and prenatal distress, it actually slows or stunts the development of the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system in the first place. Because the pregnancy is very sympathetic-y, right? Making up a word, and very fight or flight. That system runs the show for mom. Mom's nervous system runs the show for developing baby's nervous system. And so a child is born. So what does that look like? Colicky, fussy, everything else later on. But birth trauma, you nailed it. Back to the anatomy of the vagus nerve, coming from the brainstem, literally, physically making its way through the vertebrae of the neck. The cranial system and the vertebral system, the bones, the soft tissues, the structure, they are designed to protect the most delicate tissue of the body, which is the brain, and then the spinal cord, and now these sensory spinal nerves. None more important than the vagus nerve. And what's unique about our anatomical design with the vagus nerve is because it's one of the only, there's 12 cranial nerves. 2 out of those 10 leave the cranial vault and go through the neck. One of them controls the muscles to the neck, which is why you'll see a kiddo with like torticollis and plagiocephaly. That's a high early red flag for ADHD later on.
Let's just break that down a little
Yeah.
bit for those that don't know what those
Okay.
terms mean.
So cranial nerve, it's a sensory nerve. There's sensory components to a nerve. So they're going out into the body and they're like an antenna, right? So there's messages coming in telling the brain, here's what's happening in this department. And they're all it's like a fuse in your house. They're all sent to a certain location, right? So different parts of the brain are receiving information from different parts of the body through these sensory nerves. The others, so inside these nerves, are also motor nerves, though. Okay. So they're outgoing nerves because once the sensory information comes in, the brain sorts it out, makes a decision, and then sends out the reaction. That's where ADHD lives. We'd like a different effect, right? We'd like a different decision. And so the vagus nerve is perhaps the most important one. And physical trauma to the neck will literally subluxate, which is misalignment, fixation, and irritation to this nerve. So it will physically damage and irritate the vagus nerve and disrupt brain-body communication in this way. And then the third thing, antibiotics, chemicals, toxins, inflammation, piss off the vagus nerve. No other way to say it. When you have inflammation in that system, the vagus nerve is very sensitive to inflammation. So it's sensitive to everything. It's sensitive to mental, emotional stress. That would be through pregnancy. It's sensitive to physical injury, forceps, vacuum, C-section, induction, cord wrap, breech position. And it's also sensitive to inflammation. So in today's world, right? Because we have all 3 of those at a higher amount than we ever had before.
All I can say, listeners, is it's not your fault.
Mm-mm.
At all. And when you've got this information, okay, well, I'm going to take this, I'm going to assess, is this a scenario that could be affecting our family? And then next question for you, Tony, is what are some practical everyday things parents can do at home to improve their child's vagus nerve function if they determine that there was some birth trauma, there was that stress?
For sure. So I love this because there's 2 sides to this coin. I have a love-loathe relationship with my job being the perfect storm guy. I love taking people back through this stuff because nobody else has. So they don't, until they go back through that and learn this, they don't actually get access to all the answers and all the potential challenges. That's not fun though, as a parent. So
Mm,
I'm glad you asked it this way. You nailed it. Because then it turns into my favorite part of my job, which is, hey, now that we have this, we can do something about this.
exactly.
Now we found that missing unlock. So at home, the most important things to do at home to regulate your child's nervous system and try and activate this vagal nerve tone is to protect sleep schedules, to protect from inflammation. So you really want to you really want to go into an anti-inflammatory diet. You really want to take sugar, toxins. Again, I'm probably not going to be dropping some revolutionary information here, right? About sleep and combating inflammation in that way. But the real other thing too is the vagus nerve responds to quiet. The vagus nerve does not like chaos or technology, honestly, because
Mhm.
the sympathetic system does. Why do you think kids get hooked on iPads and phones and everything? Because they run at that frequency. So getting outside, and you don't. And now once you're out there, be out there. That's kind of what should you do? Be out there, okay? Let it be quiet. Let it be device free. Let it be physical. Let it be out, grounding and doing these sort of things. So those are kind of the big simple fish to it. The one thing I know too that we can chat about is a lot of kiddos have had damage to their vagus nerve.
Mhm.
It's absolutely in a pretty stuck place, right? Their nervous system is there. So that's where adjustments, like a lot of families may hear that and go, man, we've been going down that list pretty significantly. Some families, I live on a farm, right, Dana? I mean, some families that are in our networks, many are such badasses. They're like, I'm gonna have my own chickens. I'm gonna go out, and homestead and all this stuff. And it's really exciting, but that might be the most frustrated parent ever who's like, I've changed everything to get my child's nervous system to heal, and we still have this, hindrance. Well, that might be where the adjustments would come into play to hit reset.
Well, let's talk about that. What role does, that chiropractic adjustments play in, repairing, supporting the vagus
Yes.
nerve? If a family goes down that path, is there a certain particular type of chiropractor that they should be looking into? And how long or how soon might they experience changes
Yeah,
after beginning care? I
for
know that
sure.
was probably 3 or 4 questions
Yeah, I
in
was
that.
gonna say. I was literally just gonna say. Let me
You
rip through that.
remember
If
all
I
of
forget to get to one of them, you catch
them.
me. All right. So number one is yes. There's two sides to this, right? There's regulation of our nervous system, but a lot of us and a lot of our kiddos need repair first. And it may seem like I'm just getting cute with those words, but we've really done a lot of study and a lot of communication about this. And you got to repair if your child went through these things. So how would you know? Two ways. Number one, to know that this is something that you are very likely to see success with. Nothing out there in the freaking world is a guarantee, right? But how could you absolutely know that this is going to be something much more likely to help your family? Number one, go back to that case history that we just went through. If you've got some of that or all of that, you got this. You got vagus nerve dysfunction and subluxation, okay? Cord wrap, forceps, and then the other signs from those three factors, your colicky baby, your torticollis, your plagiocephaly, your reflux, chronic ear infections, tonsils and adenoids needing to be removed. These are all signs that there's cervical subluxation, which would be messing with the vagus nerve, okay? So you look at the case history, and that's all you need to do. Parents, if you're like, wow, that actually sounds a lot like my kiddo, okay, move in this direction. Second, we use technology. So even me, if I go to tonight, my son's got a basketball game. Somebody slides up next to me, Dana, and they're like, I see you on Instagram and Facebook, and you're talking about ADHD all the time. And they say, my kid has these challenges. I'm the most honest, forthright person ever. I'm going to say, sounds like we probably could help. I don't know for sure, though, until we run our scans. So we have diagnostic technology, thermal EMG, and what's called heart rate variability technology. So I'll keep it simple because verbally it's hard to figure out what this is. And it's so visual, just like labs, right? They're so powerful to tell us what is and is not happening. So getting the scans is a huge thing to it that comes from it. And what it looks like is it absolutely is a specialty within chiropractic. Every chiropractic adjustment is going to tap into the nervous system. And it's going to sound weird. I still am perturbed by this myself, that our profession has its head, where so often. Okay. And I don't think we're alone in that. But you have most chiropractors in your community out there, moms and dads, awesomely. They take care of back pain. They take care of car accidents. They take care of injuries. So it's more of a musculoskeletal, structural, pain-based approach. You're there for a short bit. You get these very heavy-handed adjustments or therapies. Your back gets better and you go on about your life. Awesome. Better than friggin' opioids and surgery. Not where you want to take your ADHD kid. Okay. There's a nervous system focused specialty. We train the heck out of our docs in the PX Docs network, which are the leading nervous system focused. So it's the technology. And then the final chapter of this, and I think I might have got them all here, is the questions is the technique. So there's two types of, when we take ADHD, I know medically they say 6 subtypes, but I like to simplify things. Back to my Iowa roots, I guess. So lovingly, we see 2 types of kiddos, and it'll get to 3 because we're going to combine the 2. Raging bull kiddos. That's the H, bolded, underlined, emphasized. Impulsivity, hyperactivity, go, 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 right? So those are the kiddos who are brilliant, so stinking smart, so empathetic, so creative, but they can't sit still to save their lives, right? And so to help them, you've got to get their vagus nerve and parasympathetic to just help them. They got a Ferrari brain with freaking Ford Focus bicycle brakes, right? So they can't so we adjust those kiddos with a certain technique that is very light touch, because you can't fight fire with fire. So there's a specific technique for raging bulls that is very calming and regulating in that way to the vagus nerve. The other kiddos, you take the H out kind of and you go with old school ADD. Drunken bull kiddos, they're not hyperactive, they're not impulsive, but they just process at a different pace. They're clumsy, they're disorganized, their emotions are dysregulated, and they just seem to be a pace or 2 behind what school and what everything like. So they're an easy target for stimulant I was going to call them salesmen because I mean to call them salesmen. On that. Sorry. I'm a chiropractor. Little grace, please. And
I could
so medicine saves
definitely,
freaking lives all the time. But this is one of those places where the drunken bull kiddo, they need a different neurologically focused technique. We actually have to get their neurological processor more efficient and more organized. So what I've done over the years, that's the Perfect Storm protocols, as it was called in the bio. A lot of different chiropractic techniques exist. We actually use a multitude of them, and the exactness and the results you're looking for, parents, sorry, long-winded answer, is it's our job as a nervous system focused pediatric chiropractor to assess your child appropriately and then match the technique and the adjusting to their exact needs, instead of saying, oh, they have a diagnosis, so everybody gets the same thing. So we're very anti-cookie cutter in that way.
I love it. I love it. So you're looking for a nervous system focused pediatric specialist, in that chiropractic realm. So, when you've got a child and you've found that specific chiropractor and you start treatment, typically how long, and I know that it will range from child to child, but typically how long will it take for families to start seeing some improvements if they're going to see those improvements?
Not long at all and terribly long. Okay, what do I mean by that, right? So number one, terribly long was meant to be dramatic, okay, for a point of emphasis here. So number one, we've got to, when you get to ADHD and you have hyperactivity, impulsivity, when you got the brain-based challenges, well, we know, you teach this so damn well. You've got body-based challenges too, right? You got biological, physiological, basic issues. I'm going to say it that way for contrast. So what we see right away, literally within days to weeks at most for the majority of our kiddos, they're sleeping better, their digestion is better, their motor planning is better, and their sensory processing is better, okay? Now, that doesn't mean we break through the meltdowns, the focus challenges, the brain-based stuff, because the brain development is dependent upon body function first. And so we'll actually kind of put blinders on. All of our kiddos have some level of dysfunction in this way. So within the first couple of weeks, always we see what are called neurological soft signs. We also can see the scans changing. So those assessment scans are also progress scans. So we run those every week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks to be able to measure objective change. And in the best of cases, you can already see decrease in impulsivity and hyperactivity and the more brain-based ADHD challenge, the more life-disrupting ones. Not that sleep issues and constipation aren't terrible, I was going to say crappy because that's pun intended, as well. But, what are parents really looking for? Help me with this stuff. School's a mess, emotions are a mess, friends are a mess. In the best cases, younger cases, if we start earlier, we can see that already in weeks to 2 to 3 months. If a child is older and they've really been stuck in the storm and going through a lot of it, it might take us 4 to 6 to 8 months to be able to turn the corner. But my last thing, I just want to paint this picture because it's so cool. And I didn't even know this. Nobody taught me this when I got into this work. And, I would grow impatient, right? Because what did I want? I wanted these kids to change overnight. Just your heart gets in the way of your head sometimes, even as a practitioner. And so that little 4-step process of number of meltdowns, how bad they are, how long they are, and then ability to get them out of it and tell that they're learning from it, an ADHD child will actually heal in reverse from those 4. What parents will start to tell us is, well, we still had our 3 meltdowns today. They were pretty bad, but they were a little shorter. And I could tell when I was trying to communicate with my son for the first time ever, like they were picking up what I was putting down. And they showed remorse, they showed understanding, they showed, there was recollection coming in, because the ADHD brain is just, when it's real bad, it's just blasted out. There's no learning, there's no recollection, there's no getting it out of it. It's just a perpetual cycle. So you actually start to heal ADHD through its 4 components in reverse. So parents may not notice that, though, if we don't point that out as the likely first thing to change. And I usually see that already happening. And actually, that's a sign of sensory processing. That's a sign of their brain finally picking up, oh, I did that. Oh, this is why I did that. And then you can heal. Now your counselors, your interventions, geez, everybody loves it when you get to that point, right? Because you can actually work with this brain to get it to redirect.
Amazing. And yeah, like I love that you pointed that out, because honestly, for a lot of families, those meltdowns are the things that put the family on hold. That was the thing that my son, suffered the most with. And that was the most stressful thing for me as a parent and for our family. But yes, like, again, when you're fixing that, the brain and the digestion and all of that, one of those first things that you actually see is the length of time that it takes for them to calm down, or the reduction. And so I love that you see that same thing, because that is actually one of the hardest things to deal with as a parent with a kiddo with ADHD. All right. Look, I ask every guest this. If you could share just one small actionable tip that parents can start using today, what would it be?
Get your own nervous system in check.
Oh,
Honestly,
love
not everybody maybe loves my tip right now. They're like, I was planning on it in the new year,
Yeah.
yeah, I just, the reason I guess my brain went there is because all the other stuff we went through is there, but sometimes, oftentimes, this storm has hit us all, and we're all freaking sympathetic dominant. We're all vagus nerve exhausted, and we are all one neurologically plugged in unit. Truth be told, I know that's a nerdy way to say it, but geez, we feed off each other. And so, in cases where we can see a kiddo healing, but then we maybe have slower progress than we normally see, or we hit a plateau that we could tell the kid. A lot of times, mom and dad are just so tapped out. And the cheat code, the real hidden unlock to get the kiddo to complete their healing, is to get mom and dad's nervous system to regulate, get their vagus nerve. So we'll get a little pushy with big hearts, and we'll say, let's get you scanned. Let's get you started. Let's get you adjusted. Let's get you regulating your nervous system. And geez, Dana, it does the trick. It's are we, obviously kids are no longer connected, directly to us, but neurologically, they're super connected to us.
Oh, you are preaching to the choir here.
Good.
You are. I mean, if the long-term listeners will know that we say a lot, like we hold the keys to our kids' nervous system. So I loved that you dropped that tip right at the end, because preaching to the choir. Thank you so much, Dr. Tony, for joining me today. Really, your passion for the vagus nerve just shines through. You've shared some, really invaluable insights with our listeners today. Please tell everyone where they can find more about your clinic, your programs, and follow your work online.
Yeah, don't feel like the one thing that's unique about me, I don't want anybody to think that they got to fly to Chicago to see me if you want nervous system focused chiropractic. I learned long ago, and my son's gone through a ton of stuff. I've gone through a ton of stuff and had amazing changes on the other side. So it just became important to me to train other chiropractors. So we have our PX Docs network, and you can get tons of articles, tons of videos through the website, www.px, that stands for experience, kind of with the X into it, docs.com. Same on Instagram, same on Facebook. That's the hand, and YouTube. That's all that. And then you're coming on soon to our podcast, the Experience Miracles Podcast. That's a badass podcast where we get into it. So however anybody loves to get content, whether it's written, video, or podcast, we crank it. And the reason I say you don't have to come to Chicago to get your kiddo those scans and get under care in this way, we've trained a network, and the training is no joke. Okay, they don't just get to know Tony and then like get on the directory. Okay, this is a earn, train, stay on the directory. We actually, oh my goodness, we actually take attendance on our clinical training every single month. They got to keep training because we'll be better at this next year than we were this year. And so if you need a doc in your hometown, your home place, you can go to that website too, and right away the directory will pop up. And that would be, you want to get local access to this because the information is helpful, but the adjustment is life-changing. And so can't do that digitally, obviously, so you can get to docs there on the directory.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again for being here. Listeners, I really hope this episode has helped you better understand the role of the vagus nerve, how we can help heal it, support it, and really make a difference in your child's journey. As always, if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to the podcast, share it with someone who might benefit, as I know there are plenty of families out there, or even leave us a review. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kate, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.